Good morning, everyone. This is Amanda Ballinger with Evolution Consulting, and we are the consulting team that worked on the Knight-Swift strategic analysis. Now, I'm joined here with my team members, Avery, Frederick, Freeman, JT Harris, Kailyn, Mejia, and McAtee. So let's jump right on in. Now, for the agenda that we have here today, we have a revised mission and vision statement, a SWOT analysis that we performed, and then the recommendations for the next 5 years, along with the financial forecast. Now, to jump right into the mission and vision, the current mission statement that Knight-Swift has wasn't very robust. It only spoke to a few major values that Knight-Swift had, and we felt that we could elaborate on that to include things that are client driven, like the front to end services that Knight-Swift provides, which is why we included all of those services here in this revised mission statement. Now, as far as the vision is concerned, this is in what we'll go into here later with the strategies, but ultimately the vision for the next 5 years includes advancements in current fleet, as well as acquiring new and improved versions of technology like autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, as we move on through the next 5 years. Now, one thing we really want to focus on whenever we look at this SWOT analysis is just the position that Knight-Swift is currently in. It has a lot of strengths internally. Now, internally, their presence across all of the United States, Canada, and Mexico is very vast. It has one of the largest van courier fleets versus any other competitor in the market. So, with such a very large presence in the market, they're capturing a lot of the market share. One other thing that sets them apart is just how client driven they are when it comes to operational procedures, the technology that they currently have, whether they acquired it or already had it, but they focus very heavily on customer solutions. So that's very, very good for a company who wants to stay on the leading edge of technology in the industry. Now, one point we would like to make about the weaknesses that Knight-Swift has is it's very high debt that it has. Now, as far as the debt, this would not necessarily be such a problem if they did not have so much of an issue with maintaining any kind of cash position. Considering they have so much debt and very little equity to back that, it can sometimes lead to disaster if the industry were to decline, for instance. So one thing that we'd like to point out is that Knight-Swift has difficulty with the acquisitions that it had here recently with multiple different competitors. That debt was far more exceeding than what their assets were. So that's something that we'd really like to look into as far as making sure that we're maintaining a good debt to income ratio. Now, for the opportunities and threats that we see within the industry, the opportunities, even though we talked about, if the industry were to decline and having that much debt would be an issue, we do see that the industry is growing and has the potential for a very large market share. So opportunities are great in the industry right now. We feel like with the growing demand, we'll eventually be able to cover up any kind of loss, which we'll go into more later, and quite possibly have more acquisitions in the future. Now, one thing that we want to point out as far as threats are concerned, as far as regulation, fluctuating fuel prices, or even just competitors in general, these are common threats among the industry, and that's why Knight-Swift has to still remain in its acquisition phases to make sure that if there is a company that comes along that needs to be acquired to try and maintain that balance, then that would also need to be taken care of. But we'll go more into that with a strategy. So I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Freeman, who's going to go over that strategic recommendation.
Thanks, Amanda, for going over the mission and vision statement as well as the SWOT analysis. Now let's dive right into the business strategy recommendations for Night Swift. Okay, so for the short-term business strategy recommendations, my team thought that it would be good for Night Swift to slow down their acquisitions so that way they could reduce their debts and increase their cash position. The overall goal is to achieve a debt to income ratio of around 15%, and this plan should be implemented within the first year to maximize its effects. And also, Night Swift currently has a very strict um, hiring policy, and they have every current and future driver has to do a 10-panel drug test, which goes over anything and everything relating drugs and alcohol. And the reason for this is to create a safe and conducive working environment and to reduce the risk of accidents, which typically, whenever an accident happens in the transportation or trucking industry, there's huge payouts and settlements. And if we could just reduce the risk of having to pay out, that we would greatly save a lot of money in the insurance department. And also, it only takes 3 to 4 weeks for a driver to get their CDL currently, which we thought was too short. So our idea is that if we implement a 6-week training program, drivers could have the necessary knowledge and experience to be on the road and drive safe and deal with certain situations accordingly. And that would also greatly reduce the cost of insurance. And last but not least, for the short-term business strategy recommendations, we think that the implementation of advanced fleet management technology would greatly help because it would reduce fuel costs. It helps optimize route planning, load management, predictive and preventative maintenance, and that should probably be rolled out within a year as well. Let's see here for the long term. And then for the long-term strategies and recommendations, primarily, we think that Night Swift making the transition over to autonomous vehicles would greatly help because that way drivers only have to worry about certain things such as maintenance or loading up things on time. And the goal is to have reached 20% of the fleet being autonomous, and that should be implemented within a year, and then we'll keep up with that over the next 5 years. And also alternative employee compensation. Currently, the trucking industry has a huge driver turnover rate, and if we could reduce that by incentivizing truck drivers by giving them better stock options, more paid time off, that would definitely reduce the turnover rate, which would help because then we don't have to spend as much time and money when it comes to recruiting drivers, and that should be implemented within a year and over the next 5 years as well. And last but not least, now that we've got some more revenue coming in at Night Swift, we should try to acquire more companies. So not exactly buying out companies outright, but purchasing smaller companies to increase our market share, which would definitely help and keep us more competitive with our competitors such as JB Hunt. And now we will pass it over to JT, who will go over the financial forecasting.
Thank you, Drew, for covering our short-term and our long-term recommendations. Now I'll be going over the financial forecast for 2024 through 2028. So to start in 2024, for our total revenue, given that the loan that Knightswift took out matures in 2024 and the changes in leadership as the CEO has recently stepped down, we see the company taking a direct hit within this first year and having to make some adjustments to their new leadership. Knightswift has also had another loan that matures in September of 2024 with an immense value of $199.8 million, which will potentially make it difficult to offset some of their gains. So we don't see them as having as big of a revenue. For salary and benefits, due to retention rates being so low within the trucking field itself and a potential recession next year, we don't want to increase any of the salaries or benefits, and we want to keep our employees where they're at currently. For fuel, given that the fuel reserves have been drained during the Biden administration and the rate of inflation and fuel costs are supposed to go up, also based on the historical data, we do see our costs for the fuel going up within this year. For operations and management, we predict a 7% projection to stay on track with the national average. as well as an increase when we're buying more trucks as well. As far as insurance goes, given that there's issues they're having with losing their insurance company this past year, we do see that them having an increase in their insurance claims. For our purchase transportation, given that one of our short-term strategies is to include advanced ELD machines and in the future move towards electric autonomous vehicles, we do see this as an upfront expense that will slowly decline over time, but we will need to make these vehicle purchases now. NiSwift is also in the process of purchasing $2.2 million worth of vehicles through the Yellow Corporation, which will drive up their purchase transportation costs. Other operating expenses, this is to stay on trend with the national historic average over the past 5 years. For total revenue for 2025, the US is more than likely to have a recession. And if we do, this could assist with some of the revenues for this year being positive. As far as salaries and benefits go, this is the beginning stages of our alternative employee compensation plan. So we do see a small increase. For fuel for 2025, we will begin to implement our long-term strategy for electric vehicles. So we'll stop spending as much on gas, but obviously we can't implement all of these vehicles at the same time. So this is why our projection is the way that it is. For our management and operations costs, due to inflation, we do see this increasing with inflation, but we don't see a reason for it to go up drastically. As terms of insurance and claims, due to the recession, we'll see less drivers on the road, both personal and commercial. And so we have to implement better and safer driver practices for our drivers, as well as some electric autonomous vehicles with their increased technological advancements. So we'll only see a 3% increase with this. For purchase transportation, we will still need to purchase more inventory and more electric vehicles. And other operating expenses, as we implement more EVs, our operating expense will go up for the maintenance and fuel costs of these vehicles. For 2026, Knight-Swift is just shy of $800 million for the loan that matures this year, and they also owe $43 million in September of 2026. Plus, a recession in 2025 will slow their revenue increase projections. For salaries, we expect to grow with inflation, but we don't see this as being anything drastic and stagnating almost. For fuel, we'll see an increase of fuel 1% because of inflation, but this will go down to our electric vehicle use. Operations management, given the historical data, I only see a positive growth in this field. And to keep up with inflation of the trends of expenses, insurance and claims, we think that this will begin to see some of our recommendations for our insurance and safety to really show. We don't see an increase for claims this year. As far as purchase transportation, we will still continue to purchase more electric vehicles and update the technology of the current vehicles within the fleet. And then our operating expenses will go up just because we'll see more electric vehicle costs in terms of charging, transportation, and upkeep of these vehicles. In terms of total revenue for 2027, this is ideally when our long-term strategies will be put in place and will have a positive impact on their revenue. And we don't have any loans maturing this year. Salaries were expected to keep up with inflation like the previous year. For fuel, the amount of money for our fuel will continue to decrease because of our implementation of our electric vehicles. For insurance and claims, our training and other implemented strategies will help reduce our insurance and claims costs, as well as not negatively affecting our cash flows anymore. For operations and management, given the historical data, we'll see a positive growth in this field. For our purchase transportation, NiSwift will still continue to purchase more vehicles, but this will decrease as the year goes on. And for operating expenses, just like the previous years, this will go up because of our need to maintain the electric vehicle fleet. For total revenue of 2028, there's no large loans that mature or implemented during this time. For salaries and benefits, we only see this increasing with insurance, but we don't see it drastically going up. Our fuel costs are just the same as the year previous, going down due to the use of electric vehicles. Operations and management fees are also going to be the same as last year. We don't see them going up dramatically. Our purchase transportation, they only need to purchase vehicles as needed at this time because they should have acquired most of the vehicles they need in previous years. And then other operating expenses, we see this increasing due to more advancements in our fleet and our technology, but it's not drastic. Our income statement, here's a more comprehensive look at how the revenues will be affected. We will see a 16% increase in revenues. And thank you so much for your time.